All right. Let's get into our first topic then, and we are taking your calls on whether the killers of Sara Sharif should ever be freed. The details of the case are absolutely harrowing. The way in which the 10-year-old suffered when she was beaten and restrained at her family home has been described as a campaign of torture that lasted 2 years. Her father, Urfan Sharif, was jailed for a minimum of 40 years, and her stepmother, Beinash Batool, was sentenced to at least 33 years. However, despite a life sentence being handed out, it does mean that they could be freed when they are 83 and 63 years old. Sara's birth mother, who had lost custody of Sara, has told journalists 100 years in jail wouldn't be enough. I'm going to take your calls on this now. Should they ever be freed? 0207 862 2222 is the number. Carole, I'll start with you on this one.
You know, even now, I mean, I've been reading about this case for months now, and even now this little girl haunts my dreams. Seriously, I think about her almost every day because she was led down so terribly badly. And when you think of what that little mite, who was 10 when she died, went through every hour of every day, the hell she suffered, this guy getting 40 years is nowhere near enough. When I read what these animals did to her, and even the judge in the court case could not read out the details without his voice faltering. He was on the verge of tears reading out because he read everything out that had happened to her. I'm not someone who's ever called for the death penalty because I think as a country we should be better than that. However, I feel that what's happening to them is not enough. I don't think they deserve a life outside of prison ever again. I don't think they deserve to breathe fresh air again. And I want them to know the hopelessness and the hell and the pain that she went through. And if they get out to live any kind of life of normality, that the mother will be Beinash Batool. She'll be 63. She could still have a life. I don't want her to have one. I don't. I think she deserves to rot in jail. And him especially. Well,
they're certainly not going to have a good time in jail. Not that anybody has a good time in jail, but particularly people that are in there for cruelty to children suffer badly. Do you think these sentences are long enough?
I think they're appropriate. In the case of Urfan Sharif, it's pretty much a whole of life sentence. I mean, if he lives as long as the average man in Britain, well, he will live to 81, or 80, in fact. And according to this sentence, he will be 83 when he gets out, so he may die in prison. Beinash Batool, she'll be in late middle age or early old life if she gets out at the age of 63. They won't come out to a life anything like what they recognise, and their names will forever be attached with the shame and the hell that they put young Sara through. We take a particular view on child killers in this country. We do tend to give them heavier sentences, but rarely is it whole of life. You might remember the case of Arthur Lavinio Hughes, little boy, aged just 6. It was a similarly awful, terrible, cruel death. He was poisoned, he was beaten, he was traumatised, and in the end he was murdered by his stepmom and the father, biological father, allowed it to be perpetrated. His stepmom, Emma Tussin, was given 29 years. Now, at the time, a few years ago, that was considered to be an extraordinary sentence. So every few years when one of these cases comes up, we demand a whole of life. But we don't do that in this country. And sadly, here's the context. One child a week is killed by a parent or significant guardian every week in this country.
But you know what gets me about this as well? You know, when these two are in jail, they will have to be protected.
Yeah.
They will have to be protected 24/7. Now, I'm thinking they're going to be protected by the authorities in a way this little girl never was. And that guts me. It really does.
So what do you do? I see what you're getting at here. And also there's the case, and there'll be lots of people, I suppose, thinking this at home, that they have committed such a hideous crime, and yet they are going to get to have a roof over their head. They're going to get 3 meals. They're going to get to have dental care before some of us.
And it's going to cost.
And so how do you solve that without taking away the chance of rehabilitation?
I'm not going to say the words, but because I don't agree with the death penalty as a thing, because like I say, I think we're better than that in this country.
We're just seeing footage of them being detained, just in case anyone was wondering what that was.
There'll be lots of people here that would say, parents especially that would want to bring back the death penalty for cases such as this. But, you know, it is going to cost this country millions of pounds to keep them in jail, to keep them protected, to keep them safe from the other inmates, because the inmates will try and get both of them.
Yeah.
That is a fact.
But Carole, we consider ourselves to be a civilised country,
but, you know, Henry,
and we don't have an eye for an eye.
But Henry, you say we're a civilised country. Yeah. No, we're not, because that little girl was failed in every area of society in this country. She was failed by social workers. She was failed by teachers. She was failed by policemen. She was failed by the head of social
the teachers
services.
were the ones who tried to raise the alarm, but Urfan Sharif and Beinash Batool took her out of school.
Oh, no, hang on.
They took her out of school.
I know they did.
As soon as the teachers raised the alarm.
But, you know,
but didn't you hear only yesterday in Parliament we hear that there's going to be a new bill which will stop parents of children who are
This is not the case.
Being able to take them out of school.
They didn't take them out as soon as they raised the alarm. What the teachers they reported the case to the social services. The social services said, we can't act until you put a report in. They didn't bother writing a report. What they did was they put it on their own computers, so they had a log of it, so they were looking to be doing something. I'm sorry, they let her down. And I'm sure there was a part of the thing that because she was wearing the hijab in school, there would have been religious sensitivities involved. You know, stuff that if you think a child is being beaten to hell.
There has certainly been criticisms of the services, whether that's the educational system, social services, policing, not communicating together.
But, you know, very quickly, it's important to add this. The pendulum swings every few years because at certain points in the news cycle, we jump up and down and say, how dare the state, these interfering left-wing social workers, take a child from their parents and whatever.
Henry.
No, Carole, I'm old enough to remember when people accuse the authorities of being preemptive, and then until something terrible like this happens, we say, why did they get involved?
When you say a little girl and she is bruised to hell, she has 25 fractures and she has injuries, they can't be hidden. You're not being preemptive in doing that.
Of course, not in those cases.
And you know the thing,
a lot of the time it's hidden.
The thing that's really shocking me now, you say we're a civilised society. The judiciary have stopped anyone being named in this case, the social workers, the coppers, the teachers, and the judge who gave back this little girl to Urfan Sharif, he is being protected as well. Why? This girl wasn't protected. Why should they all be protected?
OK, let's go to the calls. Lots of calls coming in on this. Tam from Manchester, should life mean life in this case?
Good morning, Storm. Good morning, panel. Yes, I certainly think it should do in this case. But what I am getting sick to death of hearing is everything that happens to these children gets trotted out, and we've learned lessons. Now, I go back to 1978, and a little girl, Maria Caldwell, the horrific abuse she was meted out to her was unbelievable. And yet near on every year we're hearing something else against children. And until we turn this system upside down and start to hold the judiciary, social services, teachers to account, then nothing is ever going to change.
Spot on.
No, but the question is, what does Tam mean by holding them to account? Because in the end,
shame them, fire them.
But shame them and fire them. But in the end, there'll still be cases the following day, the following week, the following month, and you're going to have hard-pressed social workers with hundreds of cases. With hundreds of cases.
I don't feel sorry for social workers today. I feel sorry for Sara
Of course
Sharif.
you feel, but in the end, it is the social workers who are on the front line. I know social workers, and they go through hell, especially if they care.
And Tam, you know, you're right, because since Maria Caldwell, there was Baby P, there was Victoria Colombier, there was all these people, and we were told this will never happen again, and it keeps on happening. And you're right, no one would be sacked over this, Tam. No one would be fired.
Do you think, Tam, in your heart of hearts, do you think this is a lack of care when it comes to services, when it comes to teachers, social workers, police, the justice system? Do you think it is a lack of care for children, or do you think that there's a chance, when you hear stats like one child is killed every week at the hands of their parents, do you think actually the sad fact of it is an overburdened system because we have too many children at risk at this country, and we have social services, policing, judicial system trying to do their very best to protect them, but at the numbers and the scale that they're dealing with it, they're just not going to get to everybody?
Social services clock on at 9 o'clock, and on a Friday they clock off at 3:45. You can't get a social service or even Kafka's after that.
He's right. And the thing is, what Storm has just said would make sense for some children, but we know this little girl was murdered. We know what happened to her. Why is no one going to pay the price for that? Because when you have a case like this and it's identified that people are at fault, we have to expose them and get them out of the system, because as long as they're in the system, it's not going to work.
Tam, thank you very much for your call. Phil from Milton Keynes, what's your view? You've heard from the panel. What's your view on this really sad situation?
Life should mean life, Storm.
Okay.
They should never come out. They should never walk the streets. Simple as that.
I mean, I suppose...
Why we can't change it in this government or the country and say, if you murder someone, regardless of what crime, if it's murder, you spend the rest of your life in prison. Simple as that. No problem.
Well,
Life
if you're going to go that far, because I would say this is immense cruelty as well as murder involved in this case.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a case apart than murder. If we're going to put murderers away for life meaning life, the overcrowding issue that we have at the moment would be seriously compounded. So I suppose we can't afford and we don't have the space to do that. But
someone can murder someone in this country and spend 15 years in prison, then walk free, and that family and relatives have, knowing that person is walking free after they've murdered someone.
But you have to accept, Phil, that there are different types of murders, if that's possible. Yeah. There's crimes of passion, there's premeditated murder, there's serial killers, there's revenge killing. You know, there's lots of different cases, and I suppose some of them you might think are not the individuals that commit these crimes are not rehabilitatable, but in others, when it's a crime of passion, perhaps they've got anger issues, perhaps there's ways that we can rehabilitate them into society. I just wonder whether we think that that's possible in a case like this.
I mean, in the case like you were talking about, when it comes to a child, they should, her father and stepmother, for me personally, my personal opinion is they should never walk the streets again.
Okay, Phil.
They should die in prison for what they've done.
Phil, thank you very much for your call. Ruth from Hampshire, it's a very emotive discussion, this one, a very emotive topic. Should life mean life when it comes to people that have killed children?
Yes, it should.
I'm trying to think. It's really difficult when you've got a story like this that is so hideous and so heinous to think of a counter-argument. And the only one I can think is, what is the point in having a 83-year-old spend any more time in prison? I mean, actually, we could make the argument. We could make the argument that his life is better and more secure in prison than it is out of prison at the moment. The argument may be that actually, as taxpayers, we shouldn't have to pay for him to have 3 meals in security. Just tell everyone his name and let him go about his business and see what happens. That could be an argument.
But that's not how it works, though, because when he gets out of prison, we will have to take care of him. The state will have to take care of him because he will not be able to earn money. He will not be able to pay for a home. So we will have to pay for him whether he's in prison or out of prison. But the point is, it's not even, and I think Henry would say that he's not going to do any harm when he's 83. But that's not what it's about. It's about him not deserving a life.
But the thing is, remember, in any sentence, there is the factor of the risk, retribution, and rehabilitation. In terms of risk, he's off the streets for 40 years, okay? And so he's not at risk to anybody. In fact, he will be at risk in prison, okay? The retribution is that sentence, Rehabilitation, well, of course, during that 40 years, he can, or maybe if he doesn't want to, attend classes.
But Sarah isn't dead for 40 years. Sarah is dead forever now. Her life has ended.
But this is not the Old Testament.
This is not
Iran where you see an eye of the eye.
You say he's not dangerous. The guy's a psychopath. The guy was abused 3 women before. He did exactly the same to the women, bit them, beat them, smacked them about.
And now he will pay the price.
To Sarah. Well,
he's not going to get 15 years.
What I'm saying to you is he's not going to
get 40 years.
He's not going to turn into a decent human being by the time he's 80.
He'll be 83. He may not even live that long.
OK, Ruth, thank you very much for your call. Darryl from Cambridgeshire, getting lots of calls on this. What's your thoughts on this subject and when it comes to individuals like these two?
Well, I think they should bring back the death penalty or hard labour for the rest of life, because there ain't no deterrent these days. They just come out again and do it again, probably like some of them do.
Well, when he comes out, Darryl, he's going to be 83. What is the likelihood of him being able to abuse in the same capacity that he can now?
Well, you never know, really, because he took a life. Why shouldn't they take a life, you know?
Okay. But with capital punishment for all murderers then, or just specific cases? The problem with capital punishment, Daryl, is that sometimes the judicial system make mistakes. And wouldn't that be a terrible thing to have that on our conscience?
Well, it would be, but if DNA this day and age can prove they did it, that's fair enough, you know, because people will keep doing it, well, there ain't no terror.
No,
you know, they don't.
Daryl, even when there is DNA that can clear somebody, look at the case of Andrew Malkinson, the guy who was accused of rape and was convicted, and people sat on the DNA. The DNA evidence wasn't produced, and so he ended up doing more than 17 years for a crime he didn't commit. The system can still be flawed.
Yeah, well, it shouldn't be really. It should be positive, you know.
You're right, it shouldn't be flawed, but there's always an element or a space for mistakes, and I suppose that's why we don't have capital punishment in this day and age. But it is not surprising me that we've had a call for it during this conversation. Daryl, thank you very much for your call.
Do you want to join Saudi Arabia, Iran, Singapore, China? They all execute people. USA, certain states. We don't want to join those guys.
What we have to do was what Tam suggested at the beginning. The whole system has to be shaken down on this because, like I say, at the end of all this, there'll be some waffly safeguarding report.
There'll be a big inquiry.
Yeah, and it will achieve absolutely nothing.
You know what it's going to say?
And
all the agencies need to work more closely together. Case conferences, everybody knows what
they say
doing.
it every time a child is murdered, and it won't make a damn bit of difference. The only thing that will make a difference is if people are held accountable. And the people who let this girl down have to be held accountable.
I just don't understand in this day and age with the technical support and all that sort of thing, why we can't do just like somewhere online where all of these services, the education system, if they have any concerns about any child, it all goes into the one database. So when they flag up a name, it comes up again.
You know, when you have social services and teachers where the social services who's been told that a child is in danger, and this wasn't the first time they've been told this little girl is in danger, and you have the teachers, them saying to the teachers, write a report, we can't do anything. Why can't you do anything? Go around and see you don't have to have a full report, go and see the little girl. Teachers, don't make the excuse that you can't go under her hijab and have a look because of whatever. Do it. You know, these are all excuses, and they're people covering their own backsides, and that's what's shocking here. There's a lot of, since this little girl was killed, all I have heard is platitudes from people saying, you know, we understand the horror. No, you don't. You don't for a second.
All right, just one more call. Stephen from Argyll and Bute, what's your view on this?
Well, I agree with the lady that was just speaking. That's my attitude.
Carole.
I mean, if the little girl was getting abused at home and the teachers notice it, that's it, stop it.
Well, that requires... Stephen is arguing for... Sorry, Stephen. Arguing for a more dynamic, more interventionist system. Yes. And great if people have the information and they're going to act upon it. And then if that means children being preemptively taken from their families, because let's remember, children are at greater risk from their immediate, guardians than anybody else.
And even higher risk if they have a step parent in the home, apparently.
Yes, definitely.
So, which teachers and social workers should already know and already be alert to. Yeah. That's not to say all step parents are terrible. Some of them are really wonderful. Yes. Yeah. Stephen, thank you very much for your call. Thanks for all your calls on this.